Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. Today we are joined by with Jimmy Johnson from the MAC staff, Amy Dolinky, who does everything opioids for MAC, and we've got Matt Walker, who is assistant to the AG. Matt, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Let's get right into it. Matt, you have been working on opioid issues for a while now. There's been a lot of different things going on over the past few years. Of course, Amy's been on our staff for 2 or 3 years working with counties on opioids. So a little bit of a new development. I saw the AG has requested local governments to sign on to another settlement. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we've been working our way through, all of the different and various settlements through since about 2021, and we're up to about 12 or 13. I don't remember the exact count, but we have one that has been going on for quite a long time now, the Purdue and Sackler family settlement. As you may recall, that initially was going through a bankruptcy process, and then the bankruptcy plan was struck down by the United States Supreme Court, and then a team of AGs from across the country, along with other folks, negotiated a new settlement with Purdue and the Sackler family, and it is now at the point where we're asking local governments to sign on and participate in that settlement.
And how do local governments do that? How do they sign on? How do they participate? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the way that it works is that these settlements are, as I'm sure you're aware, are rather complicated from a legal standpoint, but they've been try to make them as easy as possible for local governments to sign on to. There's what I usually refer to as an implementation manager, and it's a company named Rubris, and they have basically a software program where they can push out DocuSign packages to local governments, and then so they get them in their email and they're able to sign them via DocuSign that way. They can also sign them in they can physically sign them and just scan in the page that they signed, and they scan it and they send it back to Rubris through their opioids participation email. But typically the process is pretty straightforward for local governments. You can have basically as many contacts as you want receive the paperwork, but only one person is deemed the signer. So there's one person that's the signer, and they sign it and send it back, and then other folks can receive it and take a look at, and help break down whatever the paperwork is. And there's, different things within the paperwork there.
Yeah, so they should be looking in their email. They should
Yep.
be getting emailed a document, which they would fill out and then return. If they don't, is there a website for them to visit or anything, or should they reach out to maybe us to get in contact with someone, or what's the best way if they don't see it? Because that happens a lot of counties. People turn over, you lose somebody, and then they don't get the email.
Yeah, certainly. So, the participation email would have went out on August 7th.
Okay.
So they should definitely have it. And if there isn't, if there isn't a person that seems to have it and is the signer, you can certainly contact you guys. You can reach out to me if you want. Either one of those things, we can get you to the right place. I can, like, from my end, I have some limited access to the software program, so I can sort of look and see who received the package. And you're right. I've noticed also that there is oftentimes, not so much that I've seen at the county level, but sometimes at townships or cities or things, that there's different folks who want to receive them as a signer rather than what they did previously. And so I've had a number of contact changes already. So that's great, because I want to have updated information.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the the state subdivision agreement. There have been some changes that have been made. Let's talk. Can you tell me a little about what those changes mean, what that means for any previous agreements and agreements
Yeah.
going forward?
Yeah, so we collaborated with the local governments, the litigating local governments, there were 87 litigating local governments, and that means those are folks who filed lawsuits against these various companies, starting, I think the earliest lawsuit that was filed was way back in 2017. And so those set of litigating governments we negotiated with to initially to figure out, how we were going to do the distribution of settlement proceeds for all these various settlements. Initially, we started off where we were going to do different state subdivision agreements for each settlement, because at that time it wasn't very clear that these settlements would be similar. We were looking at a couple of the bankruptcies and the distributor settlement and everything, and they looked pretty different. And so it was like, well, these agreements maybe need to be different. As we've progressed, though, it's been clear that the framework that was put in place with the distributor settlement has really been applied sort of to almost across the board to the majority of the settlements that we've had. So it's most of them, I would say. I think 7 or 8 of them now that follow the same framework, and those are all the ones that we're talking about. That's the distributors: Janssen, CVS, Allergan, Teva, Walmart, Walgreens, and now the Purdue Sackler settlement, and I believe also upcoming the generic manufacturer settlement as well. That one is not something that has been released yet, but it will be soon. So since the framework was the same for all of those settlements, it made sense to have one agreement. Excuse me. And to make that framework and that agreement the same and apply across the board to all those settlements in the same way. So what we did was we used what we had already done in previous state subdivision agreements and just collapsed it and combined it down into one agreement. So it's just one document to reference rather than 3 or 4. So from that standpoint, as I'm sure you probably know, it's a lot easier to reference one thing than it is to reference 3 or 4 different things. So that's sort of the first change. The next change, the next big change, I would say, is in terms of clarifying and restating the roles and I would say roles and responsibilities of both the state and local governments in this. We wanted to clarify that local governments can come and ask the Department of Attorney General for generalized guidance about opioid settlement expenditures, right? So these are things that, like, say you're a local government, right, and you receive some opioid settlement money, and you're wondering, well, what can I spend it on? And you come up with what you feel like is a really good idea, but you're not sure. You can reach out to our office and get some help, to figure out if that's something that is going to work or not going to work. And so that's something that's new and clarified in there. We also wrote it in such a way that it makes it clear that the Department of Attorney General can just do that on its own as well. So if there's something that comes up that, say, is we start to hear about from a national standpoint, that seems to be an issue, we can issue some generalized guidance to local governments about what's going on. So that's the first thing. The next thing is we have put in place reporting requirements for both the state and local governments. And at the state level, this is something that we were already engaged in, because the budget language requires us and DHHS to report on certain figures I think for DHHS it's every 6 months, And then for us, it's we maintain a opioid settlement payment estimator that details a lot of what the state receives and gives estimates as to what local governments can expect. But and we do that. We try to maintain that certainly on an annual basis, but usually it ends up being every 6 months as well. So we were kind of already doing that, but for local governments, there wasn't really anything in place for them to report back on how much money they're receiving or what they're spending it on. And so we put that in place in collaboration with those local governments to have that information come across.
Yeah, so a couple new changes there with the reporting and obviously the guidance, and I want to talk a little bit about both those a little more on the and again, this, to take a step back, this is dictated by that agreement. It's not state policy or anything like that. It's dictated by this lawsuit agreement. So I think it's important to note that. And that was negotiated through the attorneys representing local governments and the AG's office and the other folks, whoever else is involved in that. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know everyone who's involved, but probably a lot of lawyers. But
yeah, that's about right.
So talk a little bit more about the reporting. Is there a retroactivity piece? Because obviously some of these funds have already been distributed. They've been spent. Is this a go forward, or is this a look back, or is it kind of grayish on how that looks?
Yeah, so it's a go forward kind of thing. There is a piece that that allows both local governments and the state to ask about any expenditures. So there may be I may want to ask about previous expenditures that wouldn't be covered by this agreement, and so that may be something that we do. But the actual reporting piece itself in the state subdivision agreement is a go forward piece. It starts in fiscal year 2026, and it's going forward from there. So it's really intended to be a forward thing.
And then is that something where the AG's office will be providing a template or guidance or things like that on how to do that properly going forward?
Yeah, certainly. So there's a couple of different ways that you can go about it. So in the state subdivision agreement, it sort of outlines a couple different alternatives as to how local governments can do that report. The first one is with a template. And we provided sort of a base template in the agreement, and the AG's office is planning to turn that into like an Excel spreadsheet to make it a bit easier for local governments to use. And so I expect that will probably be the most user-friendly method if you don't have any other method. The alternative is that if you want to, if you already have documents that would show the information that's being asked for, then you can submit those documents. So, for example, I think there's a budgeting statute that requires local governments to submit information to Treasury on an annual basis. And so, if they're already submitting those documents to Treasury and it already shows what they received and what they spent, then they can use those documents as their report as well if they want.
And then will this be an annual thing, the reporting?
Yep. So it's intended to be an annual report. I would see it as something that would sort of occur shortly after the fiscal year ends. But because it's on that fiscal year basis, I don't expect the first reports until really probably this time next year. But hopefully it will be pretty straightforward for local governments that are doing it, and pretty straightforward for us at the state level where we're reporting similar information. It's should be something that the template can handle pretty easily.
Yeah, and then how do you anticipate the reporting data to be used? Do you think it'll lead to more collaboration maybe between state and local efforts in the opioid space? Because I know that's been a
Yeah.
concern on some people's, like, where are locals spending their money versus the state, or who's filling in what gaps? Are they duplicating? I mean, what do you anticipate some of the reporting to be used for?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, certainly public health is one of the top goals for reporting. Really, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, is that the idea is really, if you can, if the local governments around you are all doing one thing, and that gap is already filled, that leaves you room to do something different, or that leaves the state room to do something different, and so if you don't have that information, though, it makes it a lot more difficult to know what's going on in any given area. And so, yeah, certainly the top goal is public health and collaboration across local governments and the state, to the extent that there can be that collaboration.
Yeah.
I think the next goal is also just to, I mean, I guess the best way that I describe it is to help local governments with anything they need, and spending the money is really sort of, I view the role as like trying to keep the boundaries in place, right? Like, we don't want to get off into left field about what opioid settlement money is intended to be used for, and start filling potholes with it. I mean, that's sort of why it is the way it is to begin with. There are a bit more guardrails in place for this opioid settlement money than there were for, say, the tobacco settlement fund. That was a complaint from a lot of local governments that they didn't want this to turn into the tobacco money.
Mhm.
And so that was what the intention was: put some more guardrails in place, and to try to focus it a lot more on opioid remediation.
Yeah, yeah, and great segue into the guidance component that you
Yeah.
talked a little bit about. That's new, because the local governments couldn't do that before. They couldn't ask the AG's office, "Hey, can I spend money on this?" So that's another new development that you mentioned with the state subdivision agreement. How do you Can you talk a little bit about how locals can go through that process of requesting guidance? Do you guys have a way to do that yet? Do you anticipate there being a way, or can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's going to be important. I know Amy has dealt with that a lot, is getting
Yeah.
questions on, "Hey, can I buy this? Can I get this? Is this okay?" And it's kind of like, well, we don't really know-ish. We don't recommend it, or we recommend it. So that's a huge component, I think, to talk about.
Yeah. So we don't have like a form or anything that we've set up. I don't see us, creating a specific form for it. I would see it as more, if you have a question, please email our opioids litigation box, and we're happy to respond. Or if you want to reach out, you can call, or really any of the ways that you would typically use to contact the AG's office if you need to. Um, the forms that get built, like the web forms that get built, they um, they can take a little while and to build. And so I don't know if we've sort of broached that particular subject quite yet. So as for right now, the best way to do it is to reach out to me, to reach out to the Sauer office in general, and I'm confident that someone will help you get to the right place. If you're asking about opioids, they will almost certainly direct you to me. And you can email me, you can call, you can email our AG dash opioid litigation at michigan.gov email. Any of those methods is great. And then we can, sort of help you from there, decide what you need.
Yeah, and I think we'll be putting those email addresses up on the video too, as we're talking here. If you're listening to it, you can always reach out to our office too. We can help facilitate the conversation with the AG's office if you're having a hard time getting someone's email address. And then finally, do you guys anticipate any sort of maybe as you start to get questions and you're providing guidance, 6 months down the road, maybe a list of putting together a list that's out there that says, hey, we're getting a lot of questions about, I don't know, body scanners or AEDs or things like that. This is our guidance on that. Do you think you guys will come out with a list at some point?
Yeah, I mean, so I would think I think we probably would. I don't think it's not a subject that we've decided on quite yet. It's something that I've seen other states do, and I think is helpful. And I think would probably be helpful to Michigan as well. And so, I think that's something that there is a lot of interest in. I've had other people ask me that same question, so I think having been asked that question a number of times, it shows me that there is interest in having that type of list. I guess I would call it like an unallowed use list, sort of. I mean, that's kind of how I would describe it. And yeah, so other states do that. Some other states do that, and I think that's something that we'll definitely look into. I don't know if it's something that we will do or not, but it's definitely something that's on the list of things to consider.
Great. Jimmy, Amy, did you guys have any questions that I may not have covered?
Nope, you covered it all, Steve. Good job.
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Matt, is there anything you wanted to touch on that I maybe didn't ask?
No, not that I can think about, and nothing off the top of my head that I think is important that we didn't touch on. Certainly, if there's any counties or any other local governments, if you have questions, I mean, please reach out. It's really, I'm really happy to answer anything you have, or sort of help you and direct you in any way that I can. Some things I can't, and I'll tell you that too. So, but please reach out, because, if there's any question about whether or not, you should sign on, we really hope that you do. Participation is the key factor in how much money Michigan gets. So the more participation, the more we get from the incentives in the structure of the settlement. So more local government participation is better. So please, if you have questions, ask, and please participate.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder, Matt. Appreciate that, and appreciate your time today, and really your time over the years. I know you and Amy speak a lot and have provided a lot of help to her, and hopefully, I know she's been doing great work with counties across the state in her role with us, and get compliments all the time on that. But I know she talks to you a lot, and you've been very helpful in that situation. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. I think that's all. So thanks, everyone. We'll sign off, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.